Donald Trump's envoy Steve Witkoff said that they're pulling back the delegation of the United States from Doha for consultations in Washington after he was disappointed from the response that came from the Palestinian movement Hamas. Witkoff said, "We have decided to bring our team home from Doha for consultations after the latest response from Hamas, which clearly shows a lack of desire to reach a ceasefire in Gaza. While the mediators have made a great effort, Hamas does not appear to be coordinated or acting in good faith. We will now consider alternative options to bring back the hostages and try and create a more stable environment for the people of Gaza. It is a shame that Hamas has acted in this selfish way. We are resolute in seeking an end to this conflict and a permanent ceasefire in Gaza." That's what Steve Witkoff said. So what is this all about exactly? And does this mean that the ceasefire talks completely collapse? Well, number one, the American administration, like the Israeli administration, they're both one, are trying to apply pressure on the Palestinian resistance to accept the surrender demands coming from the Zionists towards the Palestinian resistance and the people of the Gaza Strip. They don't like the fact that the Palestinian resistance stands its ground and stands firmly in the negotiations. As a matter of fact, many in the United States administration said that they are tough negotiators. They're really hard with the negotiations, and they at many times adhered to many demands of the Palestinian resistance, which are very basic and what the Palestinian people need at the end of the day, nothing that would leave Israel with control over the Gaza Strip. He said he's taking them back for a consultation, but is having a dig at Hamas. Is it substantiated? What was the actual response that was coming from Hamas? Well, they were not elaborating too much about the nature of the response, apart from the fact that they have submitted the response. Certain reports that came up said that Hamas's demands in relation to the numbers of prisoners or the names of the prisoners that they demand Israel to be releasing from the dungeons of the Zionists in occupied Palestine is not acceptable. What happened to the statement of Steve Witkoff himself just a week ago that everything is fine, it's all positive? One point left, and that is it. And that point was, according to him, and reports that spoke about his statement, was the borderlines and the what's called the Morag axis in Israel withdrawing slightly. What happened now? A couple of days ago, I spoke to you about the fact that the American and Israeli administrations are playing a psychological game against the Palestinian population to bring their hopes up and then take them down. They want to destroy the mentality of the Palestinian people. They're trying to defeat the spirit of the Palestinian people and try and show everyone the situation is hopeless and that the population of Gaza will be kneeling down forcefully to the Zionists. Clearly, the Palestinian resistance is aware of that, and they are not submitting to all of these demands. Now, from Hamas's perspective, they said, well, we were surprised from the statements that came from Steve Witkoff. We received positive feedback from the mediators. We received positive feedback during the negotiations, and we were treating the negotiations with all leniency because we are keen to end the war in a dignified manner, in a way that will be beneficial for the Palestinian people. Clearly something that's not on the schedule of Zionist Witkoff or Zionist Israel. These people want the Palestinians to surrender and hand in Gaza and leave. So far, we have seen concessions. Number one, they're not talking about disarming. Number two, they already decided that they will be taking steps back in relation to the borderline and what's called the buffer zone. They're not talking about expelling the resistance leaders outside of the Gaza Strip. All of that is off the table. So clearly there is progress there in the talks. Another very important thing here is that Israel did not say that the door is closed on the ceasefire. Netanyahu, his office said that they brought the Israeli delegation back to Israel for consultations. Now, these consultations have been going on for a very long time, back and forth, but now, usually, Israel, what it does with situations such as this is it gets it as an excuse to completely end everything and explode the situation. But that's not the situation with Benjamin Netanyahu now. Benjamin Netanyahu is actually looking for a way out because we're talking about early elections 2026. Netanyahu wants something to happen beforehand, and Benjamin Netanyahu knows that he has to have a deal before any elections. He cannot go to another election with war ongoing inside of the Gaza Strip, a genocide with so much criticism that he's being faced with. Add to that the increasing pressure that's coming from the streets in Israel, everyone blaming Netanyahu himself and his government for all of this delay and the killing of more genocidal soldiers. Israel confirmed today that 8 were targeted in central Gaza, and in the northern part of Gaza. There was another operation inside of Israel today with a person running over at least 8 genocide terrorist soldiers from the IDF. So the situation isn't great inside of the Gaza Strip. So this means that the talks haven't really ended, but it shows the true nature of the treacherous and backstabbing American administration with no integrity whatsoever and always playing on the side of Israel, despite all of the statements that they have been giving about positivity or lack thereof. However, the main point is the negotiations are still ongoing, and Israel itself said clearly that they did not close the door. They said, we haven't closed the door on the negotiations. We're still going with them. We brought them back for consultations, and there is significant development. However, in a typical manner, Steve Witkoff wants to blame the Palestinian side over everything and blame the Palestinian resistance for being difficult in the negotiations. Which leads me to the second thing that I wanted to talk to you about. Yemen has been, of course, the side that's always open supporting Palestine. But today there's a special request. The leader of Ansarullah, Abdul Malik Al-Houthi, came up with an unusual request today for the countries surrounding Palestine. Recently, there have been more talks about opening the borders. They're asking countries surrounding occupied Palestine, open the borders for the people to get in, to help the population in Gaza. They're being starved to death. We want to help them out. And now the Ansarullah leader himself is directly asking countries as well to open the crossings and allow the fighters of Yemen to go and enter, because according to him, this is what we are waiting for. This is the thing that we want. We have hundreds of thousands of people who are just waiting to go in. This time, the leader of Ansarullah is increasing his criticism towards the Arab countries surrounding Israel, especially those with borders in occupied Palestine, next to occupied Palestine. He wants to go in, he wants the Yemeni people to go in. And by the way, these requests and demands that are coming from Yemen, they're not coming out of nowhere. The Yemeni armed forces have been training on ground combat, and they've had multiple drills since the beginning of Al-Aqsa flood to go and invade bases inside of occupied Palestine and settlements too, and even imprison genocide soldiers. That means these people are actually prepared, and they have the capacity and capability and willingness to go. However, you're dealing with a situation where a population is starving to death, with thousands of trucks waiting either in Egypt or in occupied Palestine, in Israel, and Israel is not allowing them to go in. And the most dangerous thing is the fact that there are some Arab media and some elements in the Arab world saying that, oh, something is going in, 30 to 40 trucks a day for a starving population, trying to whitewash all of the starvation campaign and the war crimes that are being conducted by Israel and support Israel's narrative by saying that the people are not actually starving to death. Because in Israel now, they're focusing a lot on internal media campaigns to show the Israeli public and the rest of the readers that there is no starvation campaign in Gaza. As a matter of fact, they have more than what they need, and this is just Hamas and the media in Gaza exaggerating everything. Although evidence is overwhelmingly showing how much the situation is bad internally, and even reporters themselves and journalists are getting thinner and thinner, covering the genocide and saying that we're starving while we're covering the actual genocide. So, from an Arab perspective, or from an Arab regime perspective, they're trying to cover up their shameful positions by saying that, oh no, the situation is actually not that bad. But anyone with a social media account can go to X and go to any other social media and see the scenes that are coming out. These people are starving. And clearly, the ruling establishments and the governments failed everywhere. Whether it's in North Africa or West Asia or Europe or the rest of it, all of them failed. The only thing remaining is more popular action. And that's why the leader of Ansarullah and more organizations now are calling for action. Which leads me to the boat that is going to the Gaza Strip, Handala. Again, activists going to try and help the Palestinians, and people even coming up with creative ideas. For example, there was a campaign being released on social media, widely circulated, trying to suggest that people actually have food in things that they can send through the sea, either in bottles or in packages that can float, and they can somehow send them off the shores of the Gaza Strip so they can reach the shores and people can get some of the aid. But this boat, apparently, reports are saying that they lost connection with them. Lost connection with them, that's a direct act of terror and sabotage from the Israeli terror army, like they did with previous boats as well. They're even bothered and afraid by people coming on personal boats, just as something symbolic. They're not going to make any huge changes in terms of aid, by the way, because there's not a lot that they can carry on a ship for a starving population of over 2 million people. But they're afraid of what that symbolizes. And more campaigns now are talking about people also going in boats in massive numbers, because there would be a limit to how much Israel and the Israeli army can actually do to stop them. So this is showing us that we are in a situation now where the level of distrust from populations has reached its peak. As in now, there is absolutely no trust or faith whatsoever in any establishment, in any organization, in any government. Clearly, none of them have been able to do anything to stop what is happening. And people are coming up with more creative ideas now to try and break the siege of the Gaza Strip and the starving population. Where is this going to lead to? Well, there are several options. Number one, on the short term, either there will be a breakthrough and the siege will be somehow lifted to a certain extent, with Benjamin Netanyahu going to early elections in 2026. But for him to go to early elections and he doesn't want the elections to be in late 2026, he's going to have some sort of a deal with Gaza. Most of the Israelis, 70% of them, they want the war to end. They don't want it to continue. Even Netanyahu's supporters. The Haredi community, one of the Haredi community leaders said that if this conscription is forced upon the community, there will be no Haredi community in Israel whatsoever, because we would rather go out of the country than live and be forced to go to the army. And if you want more numbers to the army, go and force conscription on those evading service in Tel Aviv, because reports say that over 100,000 in Tel Aviv only ran away from service. They're refusing to serve. If there is a deal, if the siege is lifted, if there's a lift to all of that pressure, that means some of that popular pressure can slightly relax. However, the more time goes by and the more inaction there is no action whatsoever to completely stop this to the sufficient levels, clearly, even coming by the main contributing factor to this genocide, which is the American administration. Without the American administration, there will be no genocide at this scale, by the way. Israel wouldn't have been able to do this on its own. That would leave people with no other option but to look for alternatives. And they already are. And the talks now in the Arab world as well of more popular groups, more gatherings and people trying to go and break the siege somehow are increasing. More pressure on the Egyptian authorities. The Egyptian authorities in the past 48 hours, they forced Al-Azhar to withdraw a post that they had on X asking the people to take more action to stop the genocide. And then they got offended. The government, the authorities in Egypt started to release more information saying that this is misleading, this undermines our work to stop the war altogether and allow aid in. The borders are open, but Israel occupies the other side. That's the excuse that's coming from them. And it's deviating from the main problem, which is Israel. Now, deviating or not deviating, we know exactly what the problem is. However, that doesn't take away from the responsibility of a country like Egypt and a country like Jordan too, but Egypt primarily because Egypt is at the borders with the Gaza Strip, from forcing aid into the starving population. No one is asking them to go on, many people would be, but it's not to a level where people are asking them to go and go on an all-out war against Israel. Just feed the people. And it's very simple. You have a humanitarian crisis. People are collapsing because they don't have food. What are you exactly waiting for? Yet instead, the Egyptian authorities are focusing more on trying to justify their position and their inaction and say that, no, you are going ahead with negotiations. Yes, there are talks, but is that sufficient to the level where it's stopping what's happening? It isn't. So the situation is very, very tense at the moment. But in terms of the negotiations, there is still a way out. And if there won't be a way out through negotiations, then clearly things are going to increase to a level where more popular action will start to take place to force this siege to end, because all other options simply failed.